Today we're going to take a look at the 2020 Bluebird rear engine Transit. And I was going to do this a little different. Instead of doing a demonstration of the pre-trip, so you can see the whole thing done in under 30 minutes like you would have to do for your CDL pre-trip exam, I'm going to break it down a little bit more, give a little more information on what we're looking at so you can have an idea of what and why we're looking at it. So we're going to start with our coolant reservoir. Our coolant reservoir, we want to make sure that it's bolted and mounted securely, not cracked, broken, or damaged. The cap is in place. All of the connections, hoses are made, and they're not kinked or leaking. Okay, and you should be able to tell from the translucency of the container where your level is. Okay, we're going to move on down to our, way in here, we're going to check out our air compressor. Our air compressor, again, it's bolted and mounted securely, not cracked, broken, or damaged. There are no loose or missing parts, and all of our connections, again, are made, and nothing is leaking from our connections, kinked or leaking. Okay, we're going to move down a little further, and we're going to check out our power steering pump. This is our power steering pump. Catherine's going to kind of hone in there and give you a better look at what that looks like. Power steering pump and our air compressor are both gear driven. Okay, the power steering pump is bolted and mounted securely, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts. All of the connections and hoses are connected properly. Nothing is kinked or leaking. When we're talking about leaking, we want to make sure that you realize that leaking could be not a fluid leak, but it could also mean that it could be an air leak. Okay, an air leak coming from your air compressor, coming from one of your brake lines, chambers, or hoses. Okay, those can all be air leaks as opposed to a fluid leak. Okay, but we're not going to differentiate when we take our CDL exam. You're just going to say if it can leak, it's not leaking. Okay, so moving on, we're going to check out our power steering reservoir. So here's your power steering reservoir. We just looked at the pump. Here's the reservoir. We would check this with the dipstick. If it had a translucent container, you could also use that as well, but this one has got the dipstick. You would take it off, wipe it up, reinsert it, and it should read between add and full. Okay, we also want to make sure that the connections are all made and that nothing is kinked or leaking, that they're bolted and mounted securely, fastened tightly. Okay, we're going to move on to our serpentine belt, which is right in front of us. Our serpentine belt, we want to make sure that it's not twisted or frayed, and when we push on it, we want to make sure that it's not deflecting more than a ½ inch. Now, in CDL, your manual will say up to 3/4, from half to 3/4. In pre-service or in ODE, the Ohio Department of Education, it says only up to a ½ inch. So there is a little bit of a difference, but in the state of Ohio, that is what your difference is. Okay? All right, so we want to make sure that that's not deflecting more than ½ inch and it's not twisted or frayed. We are going to take a look at our oil dipstick right up here. We would take that out, wipe it off, reinsert it, take it back out again, and we want to make sure that it's between add and full. Now, here's another thing that you're not going to need for your CDL exam, but you will need to point out for your pre-service or recertification. You're going to pull the transmission dipstick the same way as the oil, but you would do that with the engine running once a week. Wipe it off, reinsert it, and it will read between add and full. Now we're going to take a look at our water pump. Our water pump is belt driven. Okay, water pump is belt driven. It's not cracked, damaged, or broken, not loose or missing, bolted and mounted securely. Okay, and again, belt driven, as is our alternator. So here's our alternator. It's belt driven, it's bolted and mounted securely, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts, and we've got the copper wiring that's all intact, not frayed or damaged in any way. Okay, those are the main parts that we're going to look at for the engine, but we're going to take a look on the side here and just point out, this again would be for your pre-service or ODE recertification, and this is the turbo, so your turbocharger right here. So that's the other engine component part that we're just going to kind of take a look at. Okay, and now we're going to move on and take a look at our suspension, brakes, and wheels. Okay, we're going to start at the front axle and take a look at our suspension and our brake system and also our steering linkage as well. And then we'll move on to tires and then the back rear axle and when we're completed. So we're going to take a look at our front spring mount, and our rear spring mount is back here. It's going to be a little harder to see, but it's back here. Okay. We want to make sure that it is bolted and mounted securely. It's got the bolt bushings inside of here. We're going to take a look at our torque leaf and spring leaf. We want to make sure that they're not shifted or cracked or broken, and that they're bolted and mounted securely and in place by the U-bolts. Look like U's. They are in place and bolted securely as well, not cracked, broken, or damaged or missing. Okay. Then we're going to look at our shock absorber right here. Our shock absorber is right here. Bolted top and bottom, not cracked, broken, or damaged, no loose or missing parts, and of course not leaking. Okay, and that would be more of a fluid leak. Okay, now we're going to take a look at our brake chamber. Here's our brake chamber right here. We want to make sure that it's clamped securely in place, mounted and clamped securely, not cracked, broken, or damaged, no loose or missing parts, and it's not leaking. Once again, leaking here particularly could be an audible leak. Okay, here's our push rod and slack adjuster. Push rod and slack adjuster, not cracked, broken, or damaged, no loose or missing parts, and if we were to tug on this, it would not move more than 1 inch. Okay, then we're going to move on to our brake line and ABS line and brake line and hose. We want to make sure they're attached securely. They're not kinked or leaking. Okay, then we are going to take a look at our brake linings and drums. Brake linings and drums. We want to make sure that the linings are not worn too thin and that the drums themselves have no grease, oil, holes, dents, or debris anywhere in there. Okay. While we're here, we are going to take a look at our gearbox. This right here is our gearbox, part of our steering linkage. Okay. We want to make sure that it is also bolted and mounted securely and not leaking. We have our pitman arm right here, our drag link right here, which is connected with the castle nut and the cotter key. We also have our tie rod, which is right down here. This long bar that goes across right there. Okay? All right. And we also have our front steering tires, which are right here. With our front steering tires, we want to make sure that they are evenly worn all the way across, 4/32 tread. The steering tires on any bus cannot be recapped. They must be new, brand new, not recapped. We want to take a look at the front of our tire. The front of our tire can have no abrasions, bulges, or cuts, ABCs. Okay, if you kind of helps to remember. Our rim. Here's our rim. We want to make sure with the rim that it has no welds other than factory. Of course, we don't want any cracks or breaks in the rim itself. We're going to take a look at all of our lug nuts. Our lug nuts, we want to make sure that all of them are in place, that they're all tight. If one was not tight, we might see a shiny pattern or a rust trail. That would indicate that one of them might be loose. Here's our hub oil seal. Our hub oil seal, we want to make sure that all the bolts are in place, they're all tight, and that this is not leaking. If this was leaking, you would probably see a spray pattern just of oil coming around the outside. And if we remove this little cap, we would see that the level is adequate. There's a little marking here. It says between add and full. You can kind of see the sight glass here. That's so you don't really have to take that off to see that in this instance. You can see it right here. So that's at an adequate level. We also want to take a look at our valve stems. Our valve stem up front here is straight and centered and has a metal cap. It's important. It doesn't look like it has a metal cap. It looks like it's not there, but if we look at it here, we can see that that is actually a metal cap covering the valve stem. The reason that we wanted to see that it's straight and centered is if it wasn't, if this was bent, that could mean that you have a loose rim or a different problem happening here. So we don't want to see that any other way. Of course, we have our mud flaps here. Okay. Then we're going to take a look at the components under the bus. We have 4 items to look at under the bus here. When we get to the under portion of the bus, we're going to talk about our frame, which is right here, and the cross members going across. Okay, really good view from this point. We want to make sure that they are bolted and mounted securely, not cracked, broken, or damaged. Nothing is hanging or missing. We're going to back it up and take a look at this is our drive shaft right here. It's in place, not cracked, broken, or damaged. It is not hanging on the U hanger, and the universal knuckle is fine and not damaged. The only other thing that we're going to point out that is technically under the bus would be our exhaust system. So here's our exhaust on the Bluebird RE. Okay, bolted and mounted securely, not cracked, broken, or damaged, and it's not leaking. Now here you could actually have, if there was a soot pattern, that could indicate a hole in your exhaust, or if we had the bus running, you might hear excessive noise. Okay. Now, once we get to the rear axle, much of what we're going to do is repeating much of what we saw up front with the back with regards to the brakes, suspension, and the wheels. So you're kind of regurgitating much of what you said. A lot of the pre-trip that you do is a lot of repetitive phrasing. So don't get intimidated by the pre-trip. A lot of it is nothing more than repetitive phrasing. So as we come back here and we're talking about your suspension and your brakes, it's a little harder to see back here, so we're not going to get as good a look. Front and rear spring mounts. This is the front portion of the rear axle spring mount. Okay, and then we also have our torque leaf and spring leaf right here. We want to make sure that all of these pieces that I'm talking about, of course, are bolted and mounted securely, not cracked, broken, or damaged, no loose or missing parts. We want to make sure that these torque and leaf spring are not shifted either, are out of alignment. They are attached with these U-bolts here, if you can see them. I know it's difficult to see. We'll try to get in there as much as we can. But there's the U-bolts, bolted securely, not cracked, broken, or damaged, no loose or missing parts as well. We also have our shock absorber, and just to check out our rear shock absorber with the rear axle, bolted top and bottom, and of course it's not leaking. It's bolted and mounted securely, not cracked, broken, or damaged. We do have our air bladder or air bag. Either terminology will work. It's got top and bottom air mounts. Right here is the air mount. Okay, and not cracked, broken, or damaged, no loose or missing parts, and it also is not leaking. And again, this one here would be like more of an audible leak, but you don't have to differentiate. Okay, here's our brake chamber right here. Now we have one here as well, but here's our brake chamber, and we have the brake hose and the ABS line. The smaller one is your ABS line, the larger one is your brake hose. We want to make sure they are attached securely, not kinked or leaking, and the brake chamber is clamped securely, and it's also not leaking. If we look across to the other side, we will see that our brake linings, again, this is going to be a little harder to see. I'll try to point it out to you. Right here, brake linings, not cracked, broken, or damaged, no loose or missing parts, and also the drums behind them have no grease, oil, holes, dents, or debris in the back. Again, much more difficult to see back here. Okay, no debris. Okay, we're going to take a look at our push rod and slack adjuster, which is right here. Push rod and slack adjuster, again in the back. Not real easy to see, right there. Push rod and slack adjuster. There we go. Attached securely, not cracked, broken, or damaged. And it, if you tugged on it, it would not move more than 1 inch. Okay. Look at our rear duals. We want to make sure, it's important that these are buddy wheels. They are evenly spaced but have no spacer. Okay, so nothing is between them, no debris. They can be recapped, and they are 2 30-seconds tread, evenly worn all the way across. Okay, now again, we're doing a lot of repeating. So the face of the tire has no abrasions, bulges, or cuts, no ABCs. The rim has no welds other than factory welds, not cracked, broken, or damaged. The lug nuts are all in place and all tight. Our axle seal, so the front was a hub oil seal, the back is an axle seal. All the bolts are in place, not cracked, broken, or damaged, not loose or missing, and it's not leaking. The valve stems, there's 2 of them in back, straight, centered, have metal caps, and if you were to check the tire pressure, you would use a tire pressure gauge. The same thing up front. Whenever you're doing your pre-trip, it's a 30-minute timed test. You'll have 30 minutes to complete the entire thing. If at any time you've forgotten an item, you can always go back, if you have time, and point out that item. So if you forgot to say that you were going to check the tire pressure with the tire pressure gauge, you can go back at that time or at any time within the 30 minutes. All right, so there's one tire stem and the other. Not cracked, broken, or damaged. They're straight, they're centered, and both have metal caps. Here's our splash guard in the back. See, I told you a lot of what we covered in the back would be very repetitive, and it was. Now that we have learned about all of the components on the rear engine transit bus, let's check around the perimeter of the bus. Now, again, I'm going to state you have 30 minutes to complete your pre-trip. You can start outside or inside. It's however you want to do it. If you look at my other pre-trip done on a conventional bus, you'll see that the pre-trip is done in the 30-minute time slot, so you can see it done that way. But here we're doing a little bit more in-depth training, okay? So we're going to take a look at our clearance lights, our yellow clearance lights, our amber warning lights, our red loading lights. All the lenses are not cracked, broken, or damaged. There's no loose or missing parts. Again, proper color. Our turn signals and headlamps and hazard lights, all the proper color, not cracked, broken, or damaged. Our windshield is in place and not cracked or damaged, as are the wiper blades. And on the second part of the video, I have the inside. So it's going to be two separate ones. Okay, then we're going to take a look at our mirror brackets. All 4 mirror brackets should be bolted and mounted securely. The mirrors should be clean and not cracked or damaged, both sides. So you're going to check both sides for that, okay? And we're also going to check our windshield wiper reservoir, which is right here, okay? We want to make sure it's bolted and mounted securely and that there's adequate fluid in the container and it's not leaking, okay? As we look at the bus and we're approaching the bus, we want to make sure that it's not leaning to the left or to the right. That would indicate a suspension problem or possibly flat tire. We want to look for any puddles underneath, and of course puddles usually would be around the engine compartment, so we'll look in the back area too. Of course that would be any type of fluid, so a gas leak or oil or coolant or power steering fluid. So any of those, or even windshield wiper fluids. We want to make sure that none of those are happening under or around the bus, okay? We're then going to, again, pick a pattern and stick with it that will help you to get through this process. And once you find that pattern that you like to go with, stick with it and keep doing it as a routine so you can get into a habit of doing it one way, okay? As we stop at the door, we want to make sure that all the glass is in place, intact, not cracked, broken, or damaged. All the rubber seals are in place, not frayed, dry rotted, none of that, okay? We're going to take a look at the grab rails. They're all bolted and mounted securely, not loose, because that might create a problem. And then our step treads are not lifted to pose a tripping hazard. Our step lights here, and then of course you'll make them function on the inside. And we want to make sure they are also proper color, being white, and that they are working when you go inside. As we are coming around the side of the bus, we're going to take a look at the side, making sure there's no damage. Also, all of the windows are in place, not cracked or damaged. We want to make sure our clearance lights on the top of the bus, they're very small on the Bluebird Transit rear engine. Want to make sure they're in place and the proper color. The proper color is going to be amber before the duals and red after. Turn signals and reflective tape and reflectors. The reflectors are amber before the duals and red after the duals. Okay, so we want to make sure that's proper color. Our fuel tank right here, well, this isn't the tank itself, but our diesel fuel, the cap, the neck is in place and tight, and it's not leaking up around the cap area. And if we look at the tank itself, the cage and the tank, they're bolted and mounted securely, and it also is not leaking. So we want to make sure that that it's closed easily and tightly. Your DEF tank, cap, nozzle, and are all in place, and again, they are also not leaking. On the Bluebird, the tank is in front, and in many of your conventionals, they are the exact opposite. So thankfully, they have made it so that you can't mistake one for the other. Okay, all right, we also have our battery compartment. This is another thing that CDL does not necessarily need pointed out, but the ODE does want you to point them out, and they want to make sure that they're all in place. The tray is in place and locked with a pin. The connections are made, and there's no excessive corrosion. Okay. This is an access panel, side access panel to the engine. We already took a look under our engine, but we're going to take a look at the outside. Again, here's our red clearance lights, our amber warning lights, our red loading lights, our red clearance light in the back. We have our turn signals and hazard lights, our brake lights, our tail lights, our backup lights, again, reflectors and reflective tape. You do have an emergency exit here. window, lights come on and the buzzer sounds. Under tall, can't reach that one real well, okay? And when you pull it back down, the lights go off, the buzzer stops, okay? All right. When you completed one side of your bus, you're going to come on the other side with regards to your brake suspension wheels and under your bus compartment. You're going to tell your examiner that you would check this side of the bus the same way you check the other side of the bus. You would just point out any differences that you had on this side of the bus, if there are any, and usually there are a few. On this particular bus, the transit, the emergency door that normally is on a conventional bus is on the side because our engine is occupying the area where there is usually the exit door. So here it is, lights come on, buzzer sounds, it opens easily, and when we close it, it goes off. Of course, windows, reflective tape and reflectors are all. Here's one thing that we did not point out. You must have a sticker that is up to date. Okay, it's for the school year that you're driving in. It's kind of like the tag on your license plate. It has to be up to date. The stop arm, we want to make sure that the reflective lenses are in place and proper color, which of course is red, and then of course you'll show them that it's functioning properly when you're on the inside. This is our circuit breaker box. Okay, so there's no real extra fuses that are on this bus, not to be confused with fusees, which we do have on the bus. All right, so that's kind of an overview of the outside of the bus, and like I said, go ahead and check out part 2 for the inside.